But right now, all their focus is on finding this 24-year-old Tunisian national, Anas Amri, and to see what he knows and what he can tell them about what happened there Monday night.
Ann Thompson on the scene, thank you so much. And for more on all of this, let's bring in Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, who serves on the Armed Services Committee. Senator, thank you very much for being with us. A holiday time, it's awful to be talking about terrorism, but that is the era we are living in. The German security and now the possibility that this was ISIS. What do we know about whether this man has even escaped and maybe even left Europe?
Well, the Germans and all of Europe are pursuing this individual. Now, as pictures public, there'll be widespread, I think, notice by all of the European community, not just Germany, to be on the lookout for this individual. It's unclear yet whether he was a self-inspired terrorist or he was being directed by ISIS or by elements. That's part of the investigation. The critical issue is to get this individual in custody as quickly as possible so he cannot do any more harm. And I know that the German authorities and European authorities are trying to do that.
I want to talk to you about Russia. Russian officials, Dmitry Persky, the spokesperson for Vladimir Putin, today saying that communications with the U.S. are frozen, whatever that means. John Kirby at the State Department has just told us that that's not the case. Secretary Kerry talked to Lavrov, the foreign minister, just yesterday, but there were new sanctions against Russians and Ukrainians leveled by the Treasury Department yesterday. We don't know if it's specifically ramping up because of Ukraine or whether this is a not-so-subtle signal about the hacking. What can you tell us about the situation with Russia right now?
Well, the Russians intruded significantly in our election process. That has been confirmed with high confidence by all of our intelligence agencies. This is a very serious situation because if we cannot have full, fair, and free elections, then our democratic process is compromised. So I've joined Senator McCain, Senator Schumer, Senator Lindsey Graham to call for a joint committee that will not only study this incident but other situations in cybersecurity to cut through the usual and very time-consuming committee structure so that we not only can know and tell the American people what happened, but we can also craft legislation that will be comprehensive and that will help us in the future, not just in elections, but in other cyber intrusions. So this situation is very serious. The Russian reaction is they've denied any culpability, but that denial, I think, is patently false.
I've heard from Democrats and Republicans and former national security officials not happy with the White House response before the election, when the Russian responsibility was first determined, if not earlier than October 7th, certainly by October 7th, when we heard from General Clapper, when we heard from other top officials, from Jay Johnson. So are you satisfied that the president was proactive enough? Was he too worried about not appearing political and not worried enough about showing strength against Vladimir Putin?
I think, first, your point is very well taken about not appearing to be overtly political and trying to sway the election. He was clearly supporting the Democratic candidate, Secretary of State Clinton, but to introduce something like this, I think he was somewhat reluctant. I think also, too, it was not as clear at that juncture the depth, the scope, and the intent of the intrusions. Then he, in fact, directed or allowed General Clapper to make a public statement which implicated the Russians, so it became part of the public debate. I think what we'd like to see right now and what we've asked for is a very detailed, publicly releasable report of what took place, attributing motivation, if that's possible, without compromising our security, our information, our intelligence information, and also steps which might be public or might be covert to ensure that the Russians know that they cannot take these actions against our democratic process.
The Financial Times reported on Saturday, Senator, that a well-known security seminar, the Cambridge Intelligence Seminar, was actually being run covertly by a Russian spy agency with a British cover. And so Sir Richard Dearlove, whom I know you know, the former head of MI6, and others have resigned from it. According to the FT, Michael Flynn was a recent participant, but the Russian intelligence was sponsoring this all the time. I've confirmed with American sources, intelligence sources, that the Russians are very active in this space, that they do a lot of covert sponsorship of think tanks and academic organizations. operations. And potentially we might be outing them as an asymmetric response to their cyber attacks. Can you give us any kind of insights into this?
What you find is the Russians are very sophisticated when it comes to cyber operations. They employ their own intelligence services. They use surrogates. They use criminal elements. They try to infiltrate. They try to make it look as if it is has no connection to Russia at all. They are very, very diligent. They spend a lot of time, effort, and resources doing that. Part of the response could be to, as you indicated, out some of these organizations, make it clear that they're connected to the Russians. But again, this argues not for a committee-by-committee review. It argues for what Senator McCain, Senator Schumer, and Senator Graham and I have called for, a comprehensive joint committee that will propose legislation, because this is not just an issue of a military cyber intervention. This embraces the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Justice Department, our laws in terms of notification of people if they are in fact subject of hacking. All this has to be done, and the most effective way to do it is study it jointly and then move quickly with legislation that'll go right to the floor and hopefully be adopted. And I think this is something that the Trump administration, when the president-elect takes office, should look at, because as long as this Russian sort of cloud is hanging around, questions of his foreign policy to be raised, because we have not definitively discovered what is the source, what was the motivation, what was the cause.
Now, I wanted to ask you about a hostage family, a story that I've been working on, which is Caitlin Coleman, an American woman from Pennsylvania. This propaganda video released by the Taliban. We believe, according to intelligence, that she is somewhere, that they are being held somewhere in that tribal region along the Pakistan-Afghan border. The two children had never before been seen being used this way. The State Department denounced it as reprehensible. These toddlers were born in captivity. She was pregnant at the time, according to friends whom I've interviewed. They are appealing, the family, the friends, and she in this video appealing, and she's reading from a script, so it's clearly propaganda, but appealing for a swap, a prisoner swap, for known Haqqani Taliban prisoners being held in Afghanistan. This was done with Bo Bergdahl, who was a military exchange. What would be the objection to President Obama? They're pleading for him to do something before he leaves office. What would be the objection to a prisoner swap in this case?
Well, I saw the video last evening. It is heart-rending, and it also indicates how despicable both the Taliban and the Haqqani network, she's actually being held by the Haqqani network, are. We are exploring every means possible, both diplomatic and otherwise, to secure her freedom and the freedom of her children and her husband. They have made demands about releasing terrorist prisoners that are being held by Afghan and U.S., but principally Afghans. And I think we've explored those options, but the ability to negotiate, the ability to be sure that they will go ahead and deliver on their part of the bargain, if there is a bargain, is a practical constraint. But we all should be concerned, not just concerned, but we are spending every effort we can to try to free these terribly, this couple and their children. It's despicable what they've suffered.
Senator, there, as you know, were a lot of complaints from the Muellers, Kayla Mueller's family, from the Foleys, and since then the president has specifically said that the FBI would not constrain private citizens from making payments, would not prosecute, as the Foleys claim that they were threatened with. There is supposedly a coordinator. But you're indicating to me that there is some ability to negotiate privately a prisoner swap if you were aware, if you knew that the deal would be kept.
Well, there are constant, from what I can discern and what's been reported publicly, attempts to communicate directly, mostly indirectly, to Taliban. They have, as you know, they have the presence in the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf states. There's, through intermediaries, discussions. I know efforts are being made to try to secure the freedom of these individuals, the mother and the father and the children. In addition, our Central Command, General Votel, was quoted publicly as this is one of the top items on his list of what he would like to accomplish very quickly in terms of using our intelligence assays to locate them, and if feasible, to see what we could do in any dimension. So, you know, efforts are underway. It's very difficult because the Taliban is, you know, difficult to determine if someone speaking for them is truly able to deliver on what they say. But I think we have to exhaust every possible means to liberate these terribly unfortunate people.
So there could be a military option?
Well, you know, again, we are trying to locate, as you referenced, one of the previous individual hostages. There was an attempt to militarily to secure his release, but that proved when we went on the site that that individual was not there. So I don't think we've excluded anything. The key thing is to ensure that these young people are not harmed in any way. That's the first, and then the second is to secure their freedom as quickly as possible. And I think we're looking at every option, but we're very, very concerned about unduly injuring them in any way, or prompting the Taliban to do something that would cause their injury, even more so than they've done already. And again, this is one example, another example of how absolutely despicable these individuals are.
Absolutely. Senator Reid, thank you very much, and to you and all of your
Andrea.
family, a happy holiday.